All right, let's talk about the racist recordings that led to the questions of redistricting fairness in Los Angeles. You guys recall, I talked about this already. The LA City Council members, including the president, had a leaked conversation in which they said some really racist shit. And, the president has now resigned. A couple people have resigned that were involved in the conversation. Let's take a look at some of the updates here.
Now on to
one of the conversations. Oh, here, they'll describe
California,
it.
Where the Los Angeles city councilor who ignited widespread outrage with racist remarks, caught on tape, has resigned under heavy pressure. In a statement, Nuri Martinez said this in part: "I wanted to see a change in my community and fight for my neighbors. This is what it has been about all along." Two other councilors heard on the same tape are ignoring calls for them to step down. Mark Strassman is in Los Angeles with more on this story. Mark, good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Gail. Nuri Martinez is gone, but Nuri fury, the citywide outrage over this leaked tape, may go on, especially since those two other council members on that tape refused to resign. Their conversation was offensive, possibly illegal, too. A backroom meeting about city redistricting, and California's Attorney General is now looking into it. The investigation, announced Wednesday, will look into whether 3 LA City Council members violated state or federal voting rights laws for conversations like the one you're about to hear. On a secretly recorded audio tape, local labor leader Ron Herrera discusses redistricting with former City Council President Nuri Martinez. Both resigned their posts this week.
I get what we have to do, right? Just massage to create districts that benefit you all, right, and the future. But we got to figure out Mark's seat, too.
That year-old recording, often coarse and racist, was obtained by the LA Times. It suggests Martinez gaming out potential ways to divvy up the district of disgraced councilman Mark Ridley Thomas.
If he resigns and the African Americans look at this as a hostile takeover because he's gone, we'll have to figure that out, because politically they're going to come after him.
Ridley Thomas is suspended from his position and facing trial, scheduled to begin next month on federal bribery charges. He's pleaded not guilty.
There's rot in LA City. There's just no other way to talk about it.
Jessica Levinson is an election law expert at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles.
These comments are not just vile, they're not just racist, they're also potentially legally problematic. What we have are discussions not just about increasing Latino voting power, but taken in context, potentially also about diluting African American voting power. And that's where you get a potential legal issue.
What's striking about Martinez's resignation statement, she apologized only to her staff. Nothing to anyone else she offended, including another council member's family and his adopted black son.
Yeah. I mean, she called Mike Bonin's 2-year-old adopted son a monkey. Wild shit, dude.
The jury.
Oh, sorry. Before I get to that here, I was going to tie this back into AOC. Where the fuck is it? LA City Council member. The hearings were recorded. It came out. AOC also had something to say about it. Here it is. Sorry. We're going to talk about Nicholas Cruz in a second.
It violates the public trust. Just point blank, period. That's the beginning of it. That's the end of it. But I do want to dig a little bit deeper into the psychology of that, because it's also just as bad, if not worse. In corrupt, racist, classist environments, systems, political situations, people in power rely on pitting communities against each other. Whether it's racially, geographically, whatever. They rely on pitting, trying to get Black communities and Latino communities and Asian communities and Native communities seen as each other's enemies, white communities, rural, urban, all of it. And leaders who fall for that are not equipped to lead. And frankly, this scarcity mentality that we need to pit or be suspicious of other ethnic groups or of other types of interest groups, geography, this, that, and the other, comes from the top. It comes from a vested classist interest, racist interest, etc.
Right. Those in the capital owning class love to divide and conquer the working class by dividing them alongside racial boundaries and pinning marginalized racial groups against one another in an effort to better dominate them, in an effort to better control them. I mean, even even fucking AOC's anti-id poll. No, this doesn't mean you're anti-identity politics, okay? The weaponization of identity politics is one thing, and the legitimate problems that people who are supposedly, quote unquote, doing identity politics are doing are an entirely separate thing. Talking about black issues does not immediately mean you're trying to divide the working class. It is a much more nuanced and much more complicated subject than the way that a lot of people believe it is. They think it's black and white. You either only talk about class boundaries or you only talk about racial boundaries, which is, of course, not how this works. Human existence is not on a binary line, okay? So stop thinking in binaries. Class in and of itself, in the way that I see intersectionality, is perhaps the most important part of intersectionality. And all other identity markers of marginalization are built upon class, are built upon classist dynamics. This is how it works. Class is the larger piece of the puzzle, which is why you can look at someone like Oprah Winfrey and a white homeless person and recognize that despite Oprah Winfrey being both a woman and black, her class position as a capital owner, as someone who is profoundly wealthy, affords her a better future and affords future generations of her next in line, family members, a better future than the white guy who is homeless. And anyone who tries to tell you that that is not the case is probably fucking stupid. All right? Only if you remove all other class markers and compare one person to the next, a black person and a white person of exact identical financial backgrounds, with exact identical jobs, can you genuinely see the main difference? The main difference between, if you want to isolate the racial component there, you have to take class out of the equation. And in that circumstance, when you isolate other factors as best as you can, you will always see centuries of racism, white supremacy, and how it was a foundational building tool, a building block of American society and American civilization, with its institutional influence still permeating in American existence. Only then do you see the difference. Because black people, when all other factors are isolated, are always going to do worse than white people. At least there is empirical evidence to show this reality, that a middle-class black person and a middle-class black family is always going to perform worse than a middle-class white family, regardless of the educational level, regardless of the opportunities afforded to them, regardless of the current financial circumstances that they are in. There it is. That's how this works. Define perform before you get canceled. I mean, like, career opportunities are not going to be as broad and as available to the black worker as it is to the white worker. Obviously, there will always be exceptions to this rule. This is not a rule in and of itself, but this is how it bears itself out in empirical evidence. How do you find two identical people like that? How do you control for all other variables besides race? You can't. It's never going to be perfect. Just like one of the main variables in this circumstance is always going to be, again, the intergenerational inability to access wealth for the black person. Every single African-American descendant of slaves in this country right now is 1.5 generations removed from abject poverty. How are you going to fucking factor that in when you try to find two identical cases between a white person and a black person? You can't. 1 out of every 5 black children has a single parent that is incarcerated. That statistic goes up to 1 out of 42 when you look at white children. How do you factor that in? The system was designed to create outcomes like this because the system but the system necessitates a permanent underclass. Even before you think about the profit rate and its tendency to decline. That's why corporations look for new alternatives to squeeze profits as best as they can from the same labor pool that it has. That's why you see it even with Twitch, which is not profitable enough. What do? We got to go to some of the content creators and ask them, demand them a higher percentage of their earnings. Anyway, let's finish this.
Because the more you can stoke like just whatever fighting amongst ourselves is less time that we're building solidarity with one another. And we need to be able to trust each other. And if we don't have that trust, we're not going to be able to build together. That's really so much at the core of what this is about. But we've seen what the outcome of those things. They're old school political machines, like from the 90s and plenty of other decades. And you know what it also yields? A lot of corruption. Because when all you care about, or any other decision on such a superficial zero-sum mentality, that is dangerous. And that is what people in power rely on in order to make sure that nothing changes.
Yeah. Those who profit from a lack of change to the hierarchy, okay, to the pre-existing hierarchy, will oftentimes use many different methods to, focus your attention elsewhere, create new enemies, to create new villains. And the weaponization of identity politics, the weaponization of one marginalized community against another is absolutely one of the more effective ways of doing so.